They built the raft from hope and desperation, 147 souls binding their fate to planks of wood that groaned beneath the weight of survival. The ship had gone down in flames at dawn, taking with it everything they thought they knew about civilization, leaving them floating between the known world and the abyss. Captain Morrison took charge immediately, his voice cutting through chaos with 30 years of naval authority. "We organize, we survive," he declared, standing at the highest point of their makeshift vessel, his uniform still bearing gold braid that marked him as a man accustomed to being obeyed. The first days were a testament to human nobility in the face of catastrophe. Dr. Harrington established a makeshift infirmary, tending injuries with salvaged supplies and gentle reassurance. Engineer Clark organized water rations with mathematical precision, ensuring equal portions while explaining survival hydration to anyone willing to listen. Young Thomas Wright, barely 18 and traveling to his first colonial posting, surprised everyone by volunteering for dangerous watch duties, scanning the horizon with the intensity of someone living his first real adventure. Sarah Chen, a missionary's daughter returning from years of distant service, became their spiritual heart, leading prayers at sunset and sharing stories that reminded them why survival was worth fighting for. The camaraderie was infectious. Men who had never spoken during weeks at sea found themselves sharing life stories. Women who had maintained careful social distances now held each other through night storms. Children became the raft's mascots, their laughter somehow rising above the constant sound of waves against wood. But the ocean is indifferent to human solidarity, and hope cannot indefinitely postpone the demands of biology. By the 7th day, carefully calculated water rations had been consumed, the last hardtack distributed, and mathematical reality began asserting itself with brutal clarity. The weak began to weaken further, the sick began to die, and their noble experiment in floating democracy began to crack along lines that had always existed beneath the surface of civilized behavior. Morrison's leadership, once inspiring, began feeling increasingly desperate, as he made promises about rescue that sounded less convincing with each repetition. Dr. Harrington's medical supplies vanished overnight, leading to accusations that split the raft into factions. Clark's ration system collapsed when it became clear some were taking more than their share, leading to the first open violence as men fought over moldy bread with animal savagery. It was Thomas who first suggested that the dead should be processed for their useful materials, rather than simply committed to the sea with ceremony. His proposition, delivered with the same earnest enthusiasm he had brought to watch duties, sent a shock through the group that marked the precise moment when survival stopped being about rescue and became about something far darker and more immediate. The transformation accelerated with each passing hour. Sarah's evening prayers became increasingly frantic as she tried to hold together a community splintering into something unrecognizable. The strong began eyeing the weak with calculations that had nothing to do with humanity. The sick found themselves pushed to the raft's edges, where chances of accidentally falling into the sea increased dramatically with each wave. Morrison revealed himself to be something other than the steady captain he had appeared, his leadership devolving into tyranny as he claimed the largest share of diminishing resources for himself and his inner circle. Dr. Harrington proved remarkably adept at determining who was too sick to justify continued resource allocation. Engineer Clark's mathematical mind found new applications in calculating the precise number of people the raft could sustain versus the number currently aboard. By the 14th day, when young Thomas took his position atop the mast for what would be his final watch, only 15 souls remained of the original 147. The raft that had once groaned under the weight of hope now carried the silence of those who had done things that could never be spoken aloud, who had made choices that had transformed them into something they no longer recognized in themselves. Thomas saw it first, the ship on the horizon, growing larger with each passing minute, flying the flag of the Maritime Rescue Service that had been searching for them since the day their vessel went down. His voice cracked as he called out the news, his words carrying across the water with an emotion that encompassed both salvation and something that felt disturbingly like disappointment. The 15 survivors began to wave frantically, their desperation having nothing to do with their desire to be saved. But as the rescue ship drew closer, as the shouts of approaching sailors became audible across the water, Captain Morrison's face underwent a transformation that had nothing to do with relief. Dr. Harrington's hands began to shake with something other than weakness. Engineer Clark stared at the approaching vessel with dawning horror that had everything to do with the questions that would inevitably follow their rescue. Because the truth, whispered among them in voices so low that even the ocean seemed reluctant to carry the words, was that the rescue ship had been following them for 13 days. Morrison had spotted it on the second day and had convinced the others that maintaining radio silence would prevent their location from being revealed to enemy vessels in the area. Dr. Harrington had supported this decision with medical arguments about the danger of false hope, while Clark provided mathematical justifications for why they needed to remain hidden from potential threats. The real reason became clear only as the rescue ship pulled alongside their raft of bones and seawater and unforgivable choices. Morrison and his inner circle had recognized the flags and markings that identified their rescuers as representatives of the War Crimes Tribunal that had been hunting them across 3 oceans for atrocities committed in distant colonies. They had been fleeing justice when their ship caught fire, and rather than face the gallows, they had chosen to sacrifice 132 innocent souls to delay a reckoning that had found them anyway. The mathematics of murder had been coldly calculated from the very beginning. As hands reached down to pull the survivors from their floating hell, as voices called out reassurances about medical care and safety, the 15 who remained understood that their real trial was just beginning. They had survived the ocean, but they had not survived each other. The raft that had carried them to safety had also carried them beyond redemption, into waters where rescue and damnation were the same thing. The rescue crew worked with professional efficiency, hauling up bodies that bore evidence of their ordeal in scars and hollow eyes and hands that shook uncontrollably when touched by human kindness. Captain Morrison submitted to rescue with the same authority he had wielded on the raft, speaking to naval officers with clipped professionalism about weather conditions and survival tactics, never mentioning the decisions that had reduced their number from 147 to 15. Dr. Harrington provided detailed medical reports about causes of death among their companions, his clinical terminology transforming murder into natural selection and atrocity into unfortunate necessity. But Thomas Wright, who had spent his final watch calculating the exact number of days they could have been saved, found he could no longer speak at all. The truth would emerge during the trials that followed, revealed in testimony that painted a picture of systematic murder disguised as survival, of leadership that had chosen damnation over justice, and had taken 132 innocent souls with them into the abyss. The raft itself would be burned, its wood scattered to the winds, leaving only the painting that would immortalize their story as one of heroic struggle rather than the chronicle of how civilized men became monsters when they believed no one was watching, and how rescue could arrive at exactly the same moment as judgment, making salvation and condemnation indistinguishable from each other, in waters where humanity itself had drowned long before the raft ever reached the shore.